What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Michael and welcome to Fudge Muppet. As you've probably noticed, Elder Scrolls 6 is the game we're most excited about when it comes to future releases. We don't want Bethesda to change the formula of previous Elder Scrolls games too much or try anything radically different. What we want is an Elder Scrolls game as brilliant as the previous ones, such as Skyrim, but more. Just make it a bigger and better game with sensational changes like the ones we have suggested in our video series, 5 Things We Want in Elder Scrolls 6. We want an improved Elder Scrolls experience, but not a game that's so different it loses the reasons we love the series in the first place. So no voiced protagonists, no other weird role-playing restrictions that make it like the Fallout 4 of the Elder Scrolls franchise, and please do not make it online multiplayer. These are just some of the things we don't want in Elder Scrolls 6, but to me they seem rather self-explanatory. However, there are other desires which people have that actually seem alright, ideas which at first might sound pretty cool. You see, in this video I'm going to be talking about desires like those, specifically ones that you want in Elder Scrolls 6 that we don't. You being Elder Scrolls fans who have left comments on other Elder Scrolls 6 discussion videos we've made so far. Understandably, this video is quite subjective, but I thought it would be interesting for me to share the perspective we have here at Fudge Muppet. Perhaps you'll agree with us, perhaps not. As is often the case, the aim of this video isn't to paint things as black and white, so I'd love to hear what you think in the comments section, and let us know if you want a part 2. Now let's dive right into it with the first thing on our list. Hybrid races. By hybrid races, we're talking about mixing the playable races together. For example, an orc and a Khajiit have a child together and produce offspring that looks like a mix between the two parents. We've seen this idea suggested as a possibility for the NPCs in Elder Scrolls 6, as well as an option for playable characters. It doesn't sound like the worst idea at first. It could provide for some very unique builds and cool characters. However, there are definitely some problems which bring me to 2 conclusions. Firstly, that it wouldn't work well because it's just too complicated and brings about too many issues, and secondly, that Bethesda wouldn't do this even if it could work well. Let's begin by covering 2 contradicting pieces of lore on the topic. The first comes from the creation of the race of Bretons, those who inhabit the lands of High Rock to this day. Elder Scrolls lore indicates that Bretons are a mix of man and mer, formed when the Oldmer left the Somerset Isles long ago and travelled to High Rock, interbreeding with the Needic people of the province. Needs being the proto-human race found in Tamriel in the Merethic and First Eras. Needs would later go on to be the main ancestor race for modern-day Imperials. Anyway, so if the Oldmer and the Needs interbred, creating a new race of Aldmiri Needic Manmer, then hybrid races should technically be possible. If an Imperial and a High Elf procreated today, would they produce some sort of Breton offspring? And why don't we see these hybrid races all over the Elder Scrolls universe throughout the game? Well, Bethesda tried to explain it with a book you can find in Morrowind, Oblivion, Skyrim, and Elder Scrolls Online. It's called Notes on Racial Phylogeny, and it says that a whole lot is not documented about racial interbreeding. However, what is known is that the races of elves and humans may mate with each other and bear fertile offspring, but then it goes on to say, generally the offspring bear the racial traits of the mother, though some traces of the father's race may also be present. This more or less explains why we don't see all these half races walking around in the game. An example I could think of is a Nord mother and a High Elf father have a child together. The child is the same race as the mother, a Nord, but perhaps is slightly taller than other Nords as the father was a High Elf. Things like that. What's contradictory, of course, is that if Notes on Racial Phylogeny was an accurate text, then Bretons as a race shouldn't exist. Even looking at them, they seem more like men with slight elvish traits, so are we going to say every single Breton came from a female Need and a male Oldmer? This pairing would have happened lots, but still, where are the mixes who turned out much more like High Elves with slight Needic features? And where are all the other mixed race possibilities? One could safely assume Bethesda added this book to basically explain why there aren't hybrid races walking around in the games, turning a blind eye to the lore of Bretons as they are inherently meant to be a hybrid race. Anyways, the idea that you'll look like the mother with a few of the father's traits would just never be implemented because it's too niche for Bethesda to focus on. The idea of properly 50-50 mixed races is more appealing from a creative perspective. However, even then, the problem with this is that it's just too complicated on so many levels. What do you get when you mix an Argonian and a Khajiit together? Some sort of furry dinosaur lizard? Personally, I just like the distinct look of each race, so it sounds like an aesthetic disaster to me. As Scott once said on this topic, think about the abilities as well. Does this half Khajiit Argonian race have the ability to breathe underwater? Does it have some sort of night eye, and to what extent? Because you can't just have both abilities. It also makes it hard to understand the lore surrounding your own character. For example, does this Argonian Khajiit creation have a connection to the Hist? Or if you were to mix an Orc and a High Elf, does it have Berserker Rage? Does it have 50 more points of Magicka? Is there a bonus to enchanting, and can it use the Highborn ability? What about a High Elf and a Wood Elf? How tall is it? Just somewhere in the middle, perhaps. The character models themselves could look really silly, I think. Like, how do you do an Argonian mixed with a Dark Elf? What about a Khajiit mixed with an Orc? Personally, I think it adds a whole layer of complication that has been unnecessary to an amazing Elder Scrolls experience so far, and very significantly, it chews up opportunity cost that could be used on better things. For example, even focusing on races, we could make the 10 playable races themselves more unique, as we've discussed before, fleshing out the passives and abilities to create more advantages and disadvantages to each race. So that's why I don't want hybrid races, even if sometimes it might sound cool to think about it. I'd love to know what you think in the comments, but even if it could work well, which I don't think it would, it's likely too convoluted for Bethesda to focus on anyway. Now let's talk about the second thing, a smaller idea which I don't want in Elder Scrolls 6, but I know some players really do. I think this will be somewhat more controversial. It's definitely a matter of preference for this one. Introducing the concept of no map markers. The desire for this tends to come from those who prefer Morrowind as their favorite Elder Scrolls game, which by the way is no crime, for it is an excellent entry in the Elder Scrolls series. The desire also isn't unfounded. One criticism of Skyrim I agree with is that it held your hand way too much. The quests would show you exactly where to go. Maybe you go into a room and you're looking for a chest. Often the map marker was just on top of the chest, leading you right to it with no investigation skills required. Arguably, it dumbs down the experience, and I definitely agree that investigation is a fun part of the game. In Morrowind, you had to do it yourself, listen to what people were saying, thoroughly read your journal entries, and use all the information to figure out where you were meant to go, how to get there, and what needed to be done. It was fun. However, I think this system works best in Morrowind, and in my opinion, it's a bit of a thing of the past. Yes, that's right, I personally prefer being given map markers, just to make the experience a little more convenient. That's not to say that I want my hand to be held at all times, but I definitely wouldn't want to go back to having no map markers at all. It's up there with the idea of no fast travel at all. I can appreciate the concept, but at the end of the day, I honestly do simply enjoy the convenience. I'm willing to admit that, and I know it's just a subjective thing. However, one thing I will say that isn't just my preference is that Morrowind and Skyrim, and for that matter Elder Scrolls 6, are very different games. As gaming advances, the AI for NPCs gets more advanced, and the societies in the games become more dynamic. In Morrowind, everything tended to be in one spot. NPCs didn't travel all over the place, and things were, generally speaking, where they were meant to be. Due to this, a system of not having map markers could work well in Morrowind. In Oblivion and Skyrim, however, you have some NPCs traveling from town to town on different schedules, and in Elder Scrolls 6 we expect things to be even more dynamic. Imagine being told to speak to a king of Daggerfall, only to head to his castle and not be aware that he actually goes hunting in the forests on that specific night of the week, and you just can't seem to figure out where he is. Multiple examples like this could get frustrating. Because of this, having map markers would be quite useful. Furthermore, if the game is extremely expansive in size compared to previous games, it's even more helpful to be shown where a very specific location is after someone talks about it and describes it to you. What I would suggest though, and I'm all for, is a system where there's still map markers but less than in Skyrim. So you'd have the general ones to show you where you need to be, but then there's certain areas where there aren't map markers because the quest is designed around you investigating what's going on in that specific moment. Skyrim did this a little bit, but it could be done more with less hand-holding in general. Perhaps to make everyone happy, Bethesda could add an option to turn off map markers in the settings, but the complication with this is that a game designed around not having map markers at all is built differently because they need to leave more clues and NPCs giving information in order for you to figure out exactly what to do and where to go. So in a nutshell, I know some people want no map markers at all, and I know why. However, from what I've said, you can see why we at Fudge Muppet don't want to see a no map markers at all system implemented into Elder Scrolls 6. Next up, we have an idea that comes from people who want to see magic and mages get some more love in Elder Scrolls 6. The main thing to note here is that we're on your side. We also want to see magic overhauled and mage build possibilities made stronger than they were in Skyrim when compared to warriors and archers. This third thing on the list that is being desired by some Elder Scrolls fans is actually more magic-based skills. So basically, this is the idea of bringing back magic schools that used to be in Elder Scrolls games, such as mysticism and thaumaturgy. It sounds cool, right? Bringing back more magic diversity and spell types and specialization would be really appreciated. On this, we can all agree. However, I actually think that adding in more magical schools in the form of new skills isn't the way to accomplish this, and I'd go as far as saying that in an attempt to improve the magic system, it would damage mage builds and make them even harder to play. So why is this? Well, as any build in the next Elder Scrolls game, there's only so many skills you can focus on. Assuming the perk system seen in Skyrim is implemented again, and I highly expect it will be, then more magic skills means more magic perk trees. I'm all for more magic perks. However, if there's more trees, then what happens is that mages simply have to invest more perks into magic skills just to access different spell types at the cost of other skills and perks. For example, let's take a level 21 warrior who has 20 perks to spend. 8 points could go into his offensive skill, two-handed, 6 into heavy armor, and 6 into smithing. Take a pure mage, also on level 21, who wants to use a variety of spell types, and he finds himself with 4 perks in destruction, 2 in thaumaturgy, 2 in mysticism, 4 in conjuration, 3 in alteration, 2 in restoration, and 3 in illusion. Obviously, you wouldn't build a character like this straight away, but you can see the point I'm making. The warrior can do everything he needs quite well with just 3 skills, whereas the mage might require all 7 skills, and they're not that good at them. To make it more realistic though, maybe the mage only uses 4 or 5 skills, but that's still more than just 3, and doesn't include extras like enchanting. By having to spread your perks so thinly because of more skills, you're just a less powerful character for your level. In Skyrim, magic skills were streamlined into 5 types of spells, and as we know in the lore, magic schools are basically just ways that magic users categorize spells. Spells from the schools of mysticism and thaumaturgy can just be moved into other classifications, like alteration for example, and remain as the exact same spell. In the real world, classifications are often redefined to include a new variety of things, so it makes sense that over the 200 years between Oblivion and Skyrim, that classifications for spells changed as well. Essentially, magic school categorizations are arbitrary, so what we think is a better idea is to keep the magic schools as they are and simply add specialization through more perk choices within the existing skill trees, and also just add more diverse and powerful spells into the list of spells available in the game. This way, mages can get access to the exact same amount of new cool spells to learn and use for a variety of purposes. They can still get more cool perks to specialize their abilities with simply by adding new perks to existing skill trees, and they don't have to spread their perks across any more skills than they already have to. As always, I'd love to hear what you think about new magic skills in the comments section, but now it's time for the fourth and final thing we've got on the list, and this is one that I see quite frequently as a desire that some people have, and that is implementing a Fallout 4 style customization system of weapons and armor. So obviously the amount of customization in Fallout 4 is nuts. You can change all the different parts of the gun, putting in different barrels, scopes, muzzles, grips, and so on. You can add different things to your armor and even change the color scheme. This was a very cool feature of Fallout 4, although there's 2 main reasons I don't want a system like this to be used in Elder Scrolls 6. The first is based on the same problem it caused in Fallout 4, and the second reason actually comes from more of a world-building lore perspective. So let's firstly talk about the problem created in Fallout 4. So being able to modify weapons and armor to such a significant extent was really fun. It provided for some really creative opportunities to make sensational weapons, and all around helped improve the apocalyptic crafting vibe of the game. The problem, however, was that it actually led to weapons feeling less unique, because all the different combinations of weapons and armor could just be created anyway. So in previous Fallout games, all the plasma rifles were the same, but then you could find a different one. For example, let's just imagine a unique plasma rifle that does have a scope, does more damage, and acts like a sniper rifle. It would have a unique name too, and there's only only one in the game. Compare this concept to Fallout 4, where you could take a plasma pistol or rifle and just change out the grip and barrel and add on a scope and literally just create your own plasma sniper rifle out of scraps and parts. Again, it was fun, but it did remove the special feeling you got from finding a true unique, and in some ways, it arguably reduced the amount of true uniques in the game. Imagine if all leather armor was the same color, but then the shadowed variant was really rare. You'd appreciate it so much more compared to just being able to take any piece of leather armor and make it black. Anyways, the same train of thought here applies to the Elder Scrolls universe. If you could just take a steel sword and change the color of the hilt, switch the crossguard to something else, maybe just make the edge serrated, or turn a double-sided battle axe into a single-sided battle axe, then it makes finding these variants less impactful. So instead of thinking, oh wow, this ebony battle axe is double-sided, you just find it and think, oh, it's just a different variant that I can create myself and switch around however and whenever I want. Same with armor. Do you remember the really special closed variant of the Imperial helmet in Skyrim that could only be found in like 3 different locations? Well, imagine if you could just take a normal heavy armor Imperial helmet and change it to the Corinthian looking one. It wouldn't be so special anymore, would it? You get the idea. So that's the first reason I don't want it, because it makes unique variants of gear feel less special. The second reason, and this is important, is that it doesn't really fit the Elder Scrolls universe and doesn't exactly make sense. So in Fallout, you have guns which are made from a combination of different attachments and pieces, and many weapons tend to be very makeshift. Even the melee weapons are like this, such as a power fist with a piece of concrete attached to it, or a shish kebab, which is like a wakizashi with nozzles mounted onto the blade and a fuel system to make it emit fire. Compare this to the Elder Scrolls universe. That is a medieval fantasy setting where you're not really dealing with makeshift gear. Weapons like axes and swords are forged from scratch, designed from the beginning to be exactly how the blacksmith intended them to be. They're balanced a specific way to function as the weapon was intended to, and not created in a way that lets them be modified through some sort of attachment system. You can't just get a Daedric battle axe forged from ebony in the heart of a Daedra and start adding on all these bells and whistles like extra spikes or a more lightweight handle. If a blacksmith makes something and no longer wants it, they can melt it down or sell it, but at the end of the day, they have to craft the new thing they want from scratch. The same concept applies to armor. It is designed to be a certain weight and to fit a certain way. This metal is hammered into shape, so you don't just get new metal pieces and stick them on all over the place like fresh Play-Doh. So basically, I don't want to just be able to change out my hilt crossguard or make my blade thicker or thinner whenever I want, because I feel like it doesn't make sense in the context of the Elder Scrolls universe. What we could have is a system that allows us to smith more variants of things from scratch. So perhaps you can forge a Daedric katana, a Daedric scimitar, and a normal Daedric sword. More weapon types is something we've always wanted, so having more options for smithing is fine. We just don't want to be able to change every little detail of a sword or pauldron on the fly. And remember what I said at the start, we don't want uniques to feel less unique. So if I don't have the ability to put red leather straps around the handle of my steel sword and a flawless ruby in the pommel, then it'll feel more rewarding when I find a true unique that Bethesda designed in this exact way, as there's only one in the game. As always, I'd love to hear your input on this one too. And that wraps up this Elder Scrolls 6 discussion, covering some of the desires that we saw in the comments which we think sound quite reasonable after an initial read, but after consideration, we personally don't want them. That said, we're not in control of what happens with Elder Scrolls 6, and I'd love to hear what you think in the comments below. We can all say what we want until Bethesda just does whatever they're gonna do anyway. Thanks so much for watching the video. I really appreciate everyone out there who also loves to theorize about Elder Scrolls 6 and really build an idea of how the game should be executed. Social media links are in the description. My name is Michael. Thanks again for stopping by, and I look forward to nerding out with you again very soon.